Okay, now here is a strange movie to cover because it's not a film I ever thought I was going to be covering. It took me years to watch. I bought it in DVD or Blu-ray years ago, and I never got around to watching it. And it's one of those weird films that you look at and go, "What? What the hell is this?" Because it stars Vin Diesel and it's directed by Sidney Lumet, and it's like the Lumet directing Vin Diesel in a courtroom drama. It's just an odd one. It's an odd story, and it's just weird. And yet it is really good. Sidney Lumet is not one of my favourite directors. He's done some good work, but he's also done some trash work. He's a director who's very light in scripts, and if you give him something really good like Network or Dog Day Afternoon, you're going to get a really terrific film. There are some films he's made that I think are terrific, but he's also made a lot of films I thought are kind of just okay. It varies a lot. So he's like a director that the consistency's just weird. I mean, a lot of people think his best one's 12 Angry Men, one of his first films. I don't. I like his 70s stuff more. But he's a director with a lot of good work in his past, but a lot of dodgy work like the Wiz and things like that as well. It's like his choosing technique. Sometimes he chose films because, well, that's different from the last one. And then by the time the film came out, it was like, well, actually, you should have done that one. I mean, he had a difficult time in the 80s where he did a couple of projects that didn't work. But in the 90s, he seemed to bounce back and do some fun stuff. Even though a lot of it wasn't the same level of some of the best 70s stuff. But he made one with Nick Nolte called Q&A, which is a good film. I would recommend watching. I haven't seen it for years, but I remember thinking it was really good. Timothy Hutton was in it as well. That's a really good one about police corruption. This one he made near the end of his career. This is when he was just making an odd film here or there. Like he made it before things to do when you're dead. I think that was his last film, one with Philip Seymour Hoffman. This one came middle of the 2000s, 2005, but it was barely released. Like people didn't know what to do with it. This was like when Vin Diesel had his big hits with the Fast and Furious, and he'd made the Riddick films, but he was in a downturn at his career at the time before he came back to the Fast and Furious, and he's back up and going. This is one of the films he made in that kind of period where he tried to pacify, he tried different things, but he did this one, and this one made no money, so it stopped him in his tracks of going towards more serious work, which is a shame because you actually watch this film, it's like, well, he's really good in this. You actually give him a good script, he can deliver, which is surprising when you look at some of his later films, they're much more monotone. Here's he's much more gregarious and much more. He won't shut up. Which, if you look at interviews with Vin Diesel, that seems to be his nature. But in a lot of the films he makes, a lot of time people seem to like him when he's a lot quieter. So this one was actually a really interesting career switch, which deserved to do a lot better than it did. It's a real shame it didn't really do much for him because it could have led to other films in this kind of style that actually would have been more interesting to see. One of the cool things is here Diesel's actually surrounded by a lot of good actors. So he has to raise his game, and he does. I mean, he's surrounded by really strong actors, and Peter Dinklage is in it with him, and Dinklage is sitting beside him for like half the movie because it's a courtroom drama and a lot of it takes place in a courtroom. The plot of it is about a guy who's in the mafia, but he's low level. He's like a cocaine dealer, so he's basically like sell cocaine to different people who want it. He's very flawed, but he's just he's working class, and that's what he does. He's in the family. It starts off him getting shot by his cousin. He's in prison, then he gets caught for something else, so he's doing a long-term stretch in the prison. When he's tied up into this RICO case, which is going to be trying to connect all these gangsters in this one family and show criminal conspiracy and prove criminal conspiracy. So everyone in this family is actually the crime family is actually getting put into one prosecution. And at that point, he's just fired his lawyer because he's paid his lawyer a fortune. His lawyer's done nothing for him but have him actually, you know, go to jail for 30 years. So he's going to defend himself, and he's like the loose cannon in this case because everyone else has got the high class lawyers like Peter Dinklage and other guys. And Peter Dinklage is the guy who's pretty much in charge of the defence. And you have Vin Diesel's character who's a hothead and he's defending himself and who's got lots of corny jokes in his pocket and things. So it causes havoc. But what's good with the situation is Lumet lets Diesel actually work against a lot of good actors. I mean, Linus Roach, plays the prosecutor, he was just in another Diesel film, Chronicles of Riddick, a year or two before. So you can think about the plot going well. If he's suddenly in another film well. Ron Silver plays a judge, and he's a very humane character who's doesn't take any guff, but he's also human. It's not like he's like nobody in this film is all good or all bad. The worst person in the film, the person you like the least, is the crime boss in charge of the family, played by Alex Rocco. He's horrible to Diesel throughout the film. He thinks Diesel's going to railroad the whole case and send him out to jail. And he's just, nobody likes him, but they have to respect him because he's the boss. And they're consistently, this guy's awful. And they don't change throughout the film. He's an awful character. He's an awful person. All the other gangsters are just like normal people. They're gangsters, but they grew up, so they're not just gangsters. They're gangsters, they also are people. The prosecutor does things wrong, but he's actually on the right. These people are criminals. He wants them put away for life so that they can't actually go and do their crimes. And the counter argument Diesel makes is, we're just working class people, we're trying to survive. So you have two opposing forces, and the film doesn't take any sides, but it does actually make sure you understand why the prosecutor's doing what he's doing. It's not just like easy out would be the prosecutor just wants to make a case so he can get a promotion. No, this guy actually believes what he's doing. He wants them in jail because of what they're doing. And it always brings it back to that. It always makes sure you remember, no matter how many cheap tactics Linus Roach's character does, he's actually got a reason for doing it, and he actually has a justifiable reason. Which is what's good about the film. And you also, even though you like someone like Peter Dinklage, he is defending criminals. You really like him, but he's not the nicest guy. So it does remind you of that every so often, even though the film's having a lot of fun, that there are moral consequences to this. But it's also a comedy drama. And all the comedy comes from Diesel, which is funny because he's funny in this film. He's this guy who can't shut up. He is, he's sentimental. He calls everyone his family, just like Fast and Furious. But in this case, it's much darker because a lot of these guys, one of his family members try to kill him. All these guys are not very loyal to him. So it's a much darker taken family. But he is a funny character. He does make horrible mistakes. He is aware of his flaws. Like he is divorced, his wife's not talking to him, his mother's dying, his father's ill. He's not going on best with his own son. He's in jail for years. He's a very flawed character. But he's likable because he's kind of honest about his flaws. And he's like, he seems remorseful about some of his flaws, and he's very working class. He's like, so there's a charm to him. There's a silliness to him. There's a real broadness to him, but it's not broad. It's broad as a character's broad, because that's the character. But it's not like hamming it up. He doesn't ham it up. He just plays him as a guy who is a bit hammy in real life. But there's a difference between doing that and actually hammy performance. This is a hammy guy, but played him so you still get the drama. And it's a real revelation that Diesel had a lot more talent than he's been allowed to show, which is a shame because he's really funny in this film. But this is a really underrated film. It's a Lumet film that's really enjoyable and really silly. And Lumet's playing all this music for the first half of the film under these scenes, and done it really well because it's Normally you get says the thing, but it's just on your face all the time. This one, it's in the background all the time, but it gives a buoyancy to the first set of scenes, and then it slowly edges away as we get into the drama a bit more, and Diesel's character starts yapping, but it's always there. It actually gives you a sense of the mentality of these characters and their kind of energy level. These are energetic people. Like, they're up to no good, they're up to trouble, but that's their character. That's what they're about. That's what they were brought up to be. And there is an element here that they keep on bringing up as a class thing. Is like, well, what do you expect these people to do? They're in a kind of neighbourhood where there's not much opportunity. Obviously, they're going to turn to crime to survive and have their families do okay. And it's obviously going to destroy them. So this is a class element to it, which Diesel's character always brings up, and the film always keeps you aware of, but also keeps you aware of the fact that these people are criminals. Like, the lower level guys have a lot more fun. The higher you go, the less fun the characters are. The less fun the mob boss is obviously an evil guy, he should be in jail. And there's some other ones around who should be in jail. But it plays around the idea that it came from a working class environment and it got corrupted. And everyone's getting brought into this one thing rather than individual cases. So there is a sense of an absurdity to the situation, but also this is a massive case. This is one of the biggest cases in the 80s, criminal charges, and this guy that Diesel plays was a guy who's messing it all up by defending himself and not shutting up and being crude. And it actually says at the beginning, a lot of the dialogue in the court cases comes from actual things said in the court cases. Like, they didn't make it up. This is just a weird situation where, of course, they pick the best moments. They pick the moments where Diesel's character goes a bit crazy. But he's not really uber crazy. He's not like a guy who's like a comedy sketch. He's not doing like Eddie Murphy thing of taking over the scenes and being unrealistic with it. No, it's like he's making mistakes that a guy in his situation would make, but it's entertaining. And he is always bringing up like the class system, the idea that a lot of these people the prosecutors bring in are scumbags who will do anything to survive. I mean, he demolishes the prosecution that badly that they have to even admit that most of the people they bring in as evidence are total scumbags who, they have to even admit that at the end of in their event speech to the prosecution, because Diesel's demolished their people so badly and just saying this guy's awful, and they have to bring it up because he's done such a good job of demolishing them, and he has annoyed his boss so much. His boss says, "Do not even talk to me," at a certain point. And it's like, and that's the guy that ended up pretty much gets him off. And it's a wonderful, absurd situation that that's the right director for it, Lumet, because he knew how to play up the absurdity but also keep it real enough. Like, the higher actors like Peter Dinklage, who could play against Diesel and actually create an interesting partnership with him, but it's not unrealistic. They can create a judge in Ron Silver who can get exasperated by Diesel, but also has some sympathy because he knows this guy's just a working class stiff ultimately. Because they're all from New York and they all know there's different social situations in New York, so they'll understand where some of these people come from. The prosecutor, Linus Roach, is a really interesting character because you're with him for a lot of time. He does bad stuff to get Diesel, but Diesel kind of prods him a lot of the time. And he has it coming. So it's a really enjoyable time because there's a really wonderful scene where Annabelle Sciorra comes in as Diesel's ex-wife. There's one scene where you start to sense that Diesel's character really does regret his mistakes. Like, he knows what he is. He knows he made horrible mistakes, and he shows some regret. And not in a very it's not a sentimental scene though. It's actually a scene of like, yeah, I really messed up. I don't know how to fix it. That kind of thing that goes throughout the film. Is like, people do not have easy fixes for the mistakes they've made. They've all kind of got that sense of I don't know how to solve this. I'm just going to stumble through it and hope for the best. Even the people who are in villainous spots, a lot of the time it's just weakness rather than malice. So it is a very interesting film, but also funny. It's always funny, and it is one of my favourite Lumet films. Even though it's objectively not as good as Dog Day Afternoon or network, but it is purely entertaining and it is very enjoyable. It just has a nice charm to it. Even though you could probably argue that they're probably a bit too kind to the gangsters, but they stick to the gangsters who are more working class, and they show that the top gangsters actually are pretty horrible. So it's a balance. Maybe they didn't quite get it perfect, but they got it good enough so you can enjoy the film and get the idea of what these people are. Like, some are okay, some aren't. Like, some of them are scumbags and some of them are just getting by. So it is a really well put together film. I'd highly recommend it. Give it a go. You'll probably think, well, what the hell is this? But this is a really enjoyable film and it's really underrated. And more people should see it. And I put off watching it for years because I thought, So don't make my mistake. Go see it. You can probably catch it for almost nothing in various streaming services or in Blu-ray. I mean, it's a film that didn't do well, so they're just trying to sell it off. But it is worth seeing. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this. I'll be back soon.